Check, check.
JNN podcast from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, Jamaica Productivity Center, Virtual Productivity Forum under the theme Productivity, COVID 19 and Human Capital Development.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Good afternoon.
JNN and Power 106 FM now present a live broadcast from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, Jamaica Productivity Center, Virtual Productivity Forum under the theme Productivity, COVID 19 and
looks like it's a no mask. So it looks like no mask. Yeah, we're the only ones.
Are you hearing me? I'm hearing me. It's my pleasure.
Can add, you can, okay, let me see. Where do you want to stop?
God and nature first made us what we are.
Oh, Novelet Denton Prince. I'm glad to be here. Okay.
Dominic Summers, President. Dominic Summers. Is it on? Dominic Summers, President of the I Create Institute. Hearing me? Good evening. Good evening, good afternoon. Very happy to be here. Needs adjusting. Dominic Summers, President of the I Create Institute. Sounds good.
Lasonia Harrison. Lasonia Harrison, President-elect.
Tamika Benjamin, Ministry of Education, Youth and Information.
Tamar Nelson, Chief Technical Director at the Jamaica Productivity Center.
Security, Jamaica Productivity Center Virtual Productivity Forum under the theme Productivity, COVID-19 and Human Capital Development.
Hello and welcome to the Jamaica Productivity Center JPC Virtual Productivity Forum. It's a mainstay in the mix of strategies used for promoting and facilitating productivity improvements in Jamaica. Low productivity has been a challenge in Jamaica over the last decade. This has been exacerbated by the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. With this in mind, and recognizing that productivity is the key to sustained economic growth, the JPC continues to bring national attention and greater awareness to the matter of productivity and the important role it plays as the country pushes towards a path of recovery and becoming more resilient to future shocks. Through its core function of public education and awareness, the center has assessed the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the educational systems, highlighting the challenges encountered by teachers, parents, and students as they try to navigate learning from home. Today's forum is being held under the theme Productivity, COVID-19, and Human Development. We welcome those of you watching on JNN and listening on Power 106 FM. A good time to let you know that you can sign up for a chance to take the iCreate Institute Digital Awareness course for free. Spots are limited, so the first 500 people to sign up will be selected. Follow the Jamaica Productivity Center JPC on at least one social media page. To get the link to register, then use the link provided in the live stream chats. Check out the social media pages. On Instagram, it's at Jamaica Productivity. On Twitter, at ProductivityJA. And Facebook, Jamaica Productivity Center. Or email jpc@mlss.gov.jm. Would like to acknowledge the Honorable Carl Samuda, the Minister of Labor and Social Security, and his State Minister, the Honorable Xavier Main, Madam Permanent Secretary Colette Roberts-Risden of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, Mr. Anthony Hyde, Chairman of the Board of the Jamaica Productivity Center, Mrs. Tamar Nelson, Chief Technical Director of the Jamaica Productivity Center, our panelists who will be properly introduced in a little while from now, and those of you watching and listening at home and abroad. We have an esteemed panel of experts to discuss, and listen keenly, you just might hear exactly what you're interested in and what you want to know more of. Productivity and the impact on education and human capital, current labor productivity and human capital trends. Solutions, best practices, how to manage the virtual classrooms, teacher-student engagement, current human capital gaps. Of course, we want to hear the success stories and the current local initiatives around areas of concern as it relates to bridging the gap. COVID-19 impact, response, and the JPC's findings from their survey. COVID-19 vaccination and the impact on labor productivity and education. The lack of devices, internet and technical skills, lack of parental guidance, innovative ways to improve levels of productivity in COVID-19 and beyond, and pivotal areas that will help the nation recover and become more resilient. We've laid the foundation, and so let's introduce the first of our panelists. She serves as head and a chief technical director of the Jamaica Productivity Center. She holds an MSc in Industrial and Systems Engineering from the Rochester Institute in New York. She holds a BSc in Industrial Engineering from the University of the West Indies, Trinidad, and is a certified Lean Six Sigma Sensei, CLSSS. You can Google that. She's a certified Scrum Master, CSM, as well as a certified Energy Manager, CEM, and a professional engineer, PE, with more than 20 years' experience working in both the public and private sectors as a business process improvement consultant. She has developed and delivered a number of improvement interventions, which also include energy solutions and training programs in the area of productivity improvement based on Lean Six Sigma principles, both locally and internationally, to more than 250 organizations. Her experience also includes training and facilitation, logistics, engineering and project management, energy conservation and management, business process analysis and re-engineering, inventory control, strategic planning, and warehouse management, to name a few. That's why she is the Chief Technical Director. She is Mrs. Tamar Nelson. We're also going to be hearing from, and we started out with Tamar because she's a member, she's leading the team, but we're going to be hearing from the other panelists and hearing about them as the program progresses. So now you have all the information you need up to this point. There's a lot more to come, but we have to officially give due regard to the national anthem. Thank you very much. A timely reminder, or if we ever needed a reminder as to why we're here. In the name of Jamaica, land we love, we're here to discuss the business of Jamaica, the business of productivity in particular. We're going to begin by inviting the State Minister in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, the Honorable Xavier Main, to bring greetings.
Thank you, Moderator Mr. Derval Malcolm, panelist Mrs. Tamar Nelson, Chief Technical Director of the Jamaica Productivity Center, Dr. Tamika Benjamin, National Mathematics Coordinator for Tertiary Support at the Ministry of Education, Mr. Winston Smith, President of the Jamaica Teachers Association, Mr. Dominic Summers, President of the I Create Institute, Mrs. Novelette Denton Prince, Acting Managing Director of the Heart NSTA, and presenter Ms. Brittany Johnson, Research Officer of the Technical Assistance Service Unit at the JPC. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It would be remiss of me not to apologize for the absence of the Honorable Carl Samuda. I know when the notices would have gone out, he was listed as the person to speak here today. But due to circumstances beyond his control, he has asked that I deliver the message on his behalf. Now, the theme productivity, COVID-19, and human development is timely as we grapple with the response to the onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic to build back Jamaica and to build it back stronger. This forum certainly provides the JPC with another platform to heighten the awareness of productivity and its related impact, not just on the economy of Jamaica, but also the lives and livelihood of its citizens and the role citizens can play in helping us to get back to normal. The JPC uses opportunities like this to share information and strategies that businesses, organizations, and individuals can use to significantly improve productivity every day. The impact of the pandemic on our labor market has been far-reaching, and this has led to a reduction in labor hours due to layoffs, ill health, death, and restricted movements, reduced demands for goods and services, disruption in supply of goods and services, slowdowns in the labor reallocation, significant reduction in the creation of new jobs, a change in employees' attitude towards work and the place of work, a shift in where and how we work, and it provides new opportunities to invest in and adapt to technology. Now, according to preliminary results from a perception survey undertaken by the JPC, it was discovered that respondents felt that flexible work arrangements increase their ability to be more productive, being able to balance work and personal responsibilities and complete tasks at their own convenience. Based on the findings, it is evident that there is a paradigm shift in the mindset of employees in Jamaica. Productivity is critical to the growth and development of any country. And if Jamaica is to remain globally competitive, then it will require a change in approach and mindset by all stakeholders from the various disciplines and industries. The government led by the Honorable Prime Minister through the JPC is actively developing a policy framework to build better awareness about productivity from a national, enterprise, and individual level. This approach will allow schools and organizations to become more aware of the importance of productivity in this competitive global market as we transition into the fourth industrial revolution. The Jamaica Productivity Center is working to ensure that the current and future labor force will have the skills needed to be competitive, innovative, and productive. These initiatives will help with the endorsement of productivity in our education and training systems, and ultimately with our human capital development. For primary, secondary, and tertiary institutions, the JPC will launch productivity clubs and productivity competitions. The second phase of the productivity innovation competition will be open to the general public. The winning ideas of the Center's inaugural productivity innovation competition included an app to support mental wellness among employees, a well-thought-out waste management system, and a way to improve agricultural productivity through a program to give farmers access to local invention. The center will form and continue partnerships with educational institutions such as MIND, Heart NSTA, the Hugh Shearer Labor Studies Institute, the University of the West Indies Department of Economics. The targeted outcomes of these partnerships will include more research on the factors impacting productivity, including productivity in the curriculum of skill development programs, and offering productivity-centered workshops to the public and private entities. Come next January, the center, in collaboration with the Hugh Shearer Labor Studies Institute, will be offering a series of workshops on productivity management. The center will also be undertaking research relating to post-pandemic job recovery and job creation. Earlier this year, the government established a COVID-19 task force to assess the impact of the pandemic on our economy and to make general and specific recommendations for recovery and building resilience. The task force was led by Professor Neville Ying, and they engaged a wide cross-section of the Jamaican economy and stakeholders in their deliberation in order to get first-hand knowledge of the impact of the pandemic. The task force has found that a more people-centered approach is needed in order to achieve significant improvement in productivity. This approach, according to the task force, must be underpinned by 4 very important elements of transformative strategies for productivity improvement at the place of work. And these include trust, creativity and innovation, strategic involvement, flexibility, and adaptability. At a later date, I will go into the details about the findings of and recommendations of the task force that the government will consider going forward. But as it relates to productivity, APC will now have to conduct special surveys and consultations with different organizations in the public and private sector on the impact of COVID-19 on productivity and their responses in this regard. Design and promote a special people-centered productivity improvement strategy with related measurement techniques and metrics for both private and public sector organizations. Introduce productivity measurement and evaluations frameworks that businesses can utilize to measure productivity rates. This should provide guidelines on the best practices, skills, and tools necessary for productivity improvement. It should also encourage and provide technical assistance for holistic wellness, to include wellness programs, healthcare adjustments, stress and management programs at the place of work. In closing, I urge everyone to embrace productivity. The effort of the government alone are never enough. It will take a strategic partnership on the part of all relevant stakeholders as we strive to bequeath to the next generation a country that is safer, more equal in opportunities, gentler in behavior, and definitely the place to live, work, do business, and raise families. I look forward to a fruitful and engaging forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Main, for that update from the ministry, and in particular with emphasis on the work of the Jamaica Productivity Center. Well, we already introduced the lady leading the Jamaica Productivity Center, Mrs. Tamar Nelson, and we'll hear from her now.
Thank you, Dervan, and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been months of planning, and it's all coming together. We are so happy at the Jamaica Productivity Center to be actually conducting this forum and to have this esteemed panel here with us. And we thank them for their patience as well and for their presence today. And you are in for a treat, ladies and gentlemen. That's all I can say. We will be looking at the whole matter of productivity, COVID-19, and human capital development. And the minister has so very well laid the platform of why we are doing this. You know, people are at the core of everything that we do. And human capital has been, we would say, the hardest hit in this pandemic over the last 19 months or so. And we thought that coming out of the task force that was set up by the minister on the labor market and COVID-19, that we would act quickly on the recommendations to see how we can bolster human capital. And what better way than looking at the topics that we have selected today. So in terms of the lay, we are looking at human capital, not only in the workplace, but also in the classroom. We're not looking at the present, we're also looking at the future, right? We want to ensure that we are ready for what's ahead of us. We are in the whole realm of the fourth industrial revolution, and COVID-19 has given us a push, as it were. How can we build on that? Not to reverse or to go back, but how can we build on that so that we can equal or even exceed what's happening in the marketplace with our trading partners. And so we want today to share what we have found, one through the productivity gap analysis, which Brittany has been working on over the last couple of months, and so excited to share with you her findings. And we have done so with the kind help of the Ministry of Education, who helped us to disseminate it to over 2,000 participants. So to all those participants who shared their feedback, thank you so much. And your feedback will help us to plan the way or chart the way forward. So you'll hear from Brittany the results of those findings. We'll also be sharing other views from you, our listeners. We have captured some of those thoughts in some video vox pops from persons all around the island, so parents, teachers, and students. So we'll hear directly from you. We couldn't have you all here with us today due to the restrictions, so this is the best way we can connect with you. And we will also be hearing on different aspects of education and human capital development from our panel here today. And one of our sponsors, iCreate, has opened up to you all a free digital awareness workshop that you can do online at your own pace. And so I'm encouraging everyone to really take up that offer and to grow. Technology is the way to go, so let's get it done. And in terms of the outcomes, we really want to add value. And so even though we know there are problems, there are gaps, we're looking at those gaps to see how we can move forward. So solutions-oriented, value-added discussions are what we're focusing on today. So we hope you have your pens and paper also you can jot down some of these things that we're going to share with you, some of the opportunities that you may not are been aware of. You're going to hear some of them today. So please stay tuned, and I won't speak anymore. Over to you so we can get to the meat of the matter, Durban.
Of course. Thank you very much, Tamar Nelson. And you've called a name a couple of times there, Brittany Johnson. And she is a research officer from the Technical Assistance Services Unit, TASU, of the Jamaica Productivity Center. And she will be making a 15-minute presentation reviewing the JPCs. And listen up, those of you, whether you're listening or watching, wherever in the world you are, you don't want to miss this. It's full of enlightening data that can help us to inform our decisions going forward. It's a 15-minute presentation which reviews the Jamaica Productivity Center's Education Gap Survey findings. Welcome, Brittany Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Malcolm. Now we're going to go into this just to whet your appetite a bit before we begin the discussion. So the Jamaica Productivity Center would have conducted a productivity and educational gap analysis just to understand the effects of online learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. But before that, we wanted to look at some facts and some trends. And we understand that productivity is essential, and it's one of the most important factors when we look at economic production functions. And the analysis, both theoretically and empirically, will show that there's a positive relationship between human capital and economic growth. So we find that where educational attainment is increased, there is the increased potential for earnings for that individual. When we look at this analysis across countries, we find that there's a positive correlation between educational attainment and output per worker. And we must understand that this is not only true across countries, it's true across time. So some more facts for you. Globally, the labor productivity rate has slowed. And then when we look at it nationally, we find that over the 5-year period, 2015 to 2019, Jamaica's national labor productivity growth has contracted by negative 0.4 on average during this time. We go further to look at the Human Capital Index for Jamaica, which as of 2020 was at 0.5, and we can look at this in comparison to countries such as China and the US, where their Human Capital Index score is at 0.7. Now, the Human Capital Index quantifies the contribution that health and education give to productivity for future workers or for our next generation of workers. And this score ranges from 0 to 1. So we're at 0.5. In the health component of the index, we find that we are relatively doing well. But when we look at the scores for the adjusted learning or even the harmonized test scores, we find that those scores are normally relatively low. So where in Jamaica, we find that a student or a child is supposed to or is expected to complete around 11.4 years of schooling, it works out in the end to only about 7.4 years of schooling. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic has really affected our economy and our society. And when we look closer on the education system, because we're looking at productivity, COVID-19, and human capital development, one of the important aspects of human capital development is education. So in Jamaica, because of the COVID-19 vaccine, we found that schools were closing island-wide and had to adopt and implement more remote learning or online learning strategies or methods. We found that the access to online learning was becoming increasingly disproportionate and thus called into question the quality of education being received by our students across the island. And from that, we also found that youths now were more likely to not engage in economic activity, because you find that even students who would have graduated from university around this time would have had a harder time finding jobs because a lot of our organizations had to restructure their businesses to answer to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the objectives of this gap analysis, they were to identify the gaps of learning from home, analyze the different impediments and their effects on the students and teachers, while recommending potential ways in which these new methods could be used and implemented to, sustain productivity while learning from home. So as Mrs. Nelson would have stated, this survey went out with the help of the Ministry of Education to over 2,000 respondents, more specifically, 2,156 parents, teachers, and students It was done electronically, so we used all the social media platforms that we had available, the Ministry of Education's database, as well as the Jamaica Productivity Center's database. Now let's just run into the results. So our category of respondents, we got responses from 642 parents, 786 students, 698 educators. And we found that across these three categories, most of our respondents would have been female respondents. In terms of parish, most of these responses would have come from St. Catherine, with those responses from Kingston and Clarendon following closely behind. Education, a lot of our responses would have come from those who would have either been teaching, would have been students, or you'd have had parents who would have had students in the primary level of schooling, with secondary and tertiary falling close behind. We wanted to see what devices were available at home versus the devices that were used for schooling. Now, the laptop, the tablet, and the smartphone, they came out on top as the devices that were available in home. But interestingly, it was the tablet and the smartphone that's used the most for schooling. And when we look at it based on an educator and a student, we find that more educators would have used their laptops for schooling, whereas the student would use the tablet or the smartphone. And sometimes we can see this coming out where some of the features from the desktop or the laptop, rather, would not reflect the features on the smartphone or the tablet. And there you can see some challenges there that would happen between the educator and the student. Thankfully, most of our respondents would have noted that they had internet access, with 94% being educators and 83% being students and parents. When we look at the parishes, all parishes would have had over 70% access. They would have said they had access to internet services. Now we ask persons to tick all that applied in terms of the learning platforms with which they were most familiar. And from this, the Google Classrooms and the Zoom platform came out on top. We get now into our comparative responses, and this would give us a deeper understanding of the perspectives of our students and teachers, and even some of the parents who would have been answering for their children. So I have enough resources to execute my classes or lectures, and we find here that teachers were more likely to say that they agreed or strongly agreed when you look at it collectively, but overall the general consensus was that they had enough resources. For those who didn't have resources, this is an average of about 50% or a little bit under 50%, who didn't have enough resources. It was in places such as Clarendon, St. Anne, and St. Thomas that would have disagreed with this statement. And we went further to look at the amount of children in each household versus the availability of resources for schooling. So we find that the students or the households that had more than 3 children wouldn't have as much resources or the availability of resources than those who had less than 3 children in their households. Guidelines were said to have been provided before starting the classes, and I'm sure a lot of you would have gotten your tutorials about how to use the different platforms, and this is showed here on the graph. So we found that for most of the students, the online tools were easy to use. And we're in a generation now where our young people love technology and we're more internet savvy, I guess. But we found that more students would agree here than teachers, but overall, the majority would agree or strongly agree that online tools are easy to use. We also found that most would agree also that they're able to communicate clearly with their students and teachers. Here now is where we see that online it's harder to gain or to grasp the concepts being taught. And this is where the graph shows that persons disagree with the statement that concepts are easier to grasp online. And they also strongly disagreed by the number of responses here that learning online is easier than face-to-face. So a lot of persons would rather to learn face-to-face than online. And we also found that it is harder for students and teachers to maintain focus during online classes. In terms of assessments, we found also that persons thought that the assessments were more. They got more assessments to do, more assignments, more quizzes online than if they were face-to-face. And the big question that was asked was if online learning should continue after the pandemic, and we got a resounding 67% that said no. But interestingly, of the 33% that would have said yes, we found that 53% of those that said yes were educators, 25% parents, and 23% students. And we go further to say that those who also said yes, of the students that said yes, 61% were tertiary students, and 26% secondary students, and 19% primary students. And we go to the recommendations, because we would have asked, how is it that we can improve? And with productivity, one of the main aspects of productivity is continuous improvement. So let's look at some of their recommendations. So they fell under these main areas: accessible internet for all, access to and provision of devices for learning, increase in the parental involvement and supervision of students, financial support, decrease in school hours to reduce the amount of time spent in front of the screen. Now, this is just some of the many responses that we would have received from this gap analysis. And I hope that this will help to clarify a few things as we go through the rest of this discussion today. Back to you, Mr. Malcolm.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brittany. I think you've already said tongues wagging, because in some instances, it's a question of who you ask, literally and figuratively. And so we're going to have to discuss that further. But thank you very much for sharing just a bit of the survey with us. At this time, we are going to, well, like I said, it depends on who you ask, right? Well, we spoke with some parents and teachers and students. Let's hear what they have had to say, or better yet, and most appropriately, let's hear their side of the story. All right. Yeah, we're going to come back to them in a moment. We're going to come back to watching and listening to those parents, teachers, and students share their experiences with remote learning. While we get ready for that, let's continue with the introduction. So you met Tamar Nelson already, and but have you met the representative of the Jamaica Teachers Association, the JTA, the most powerful lobby group in the history of Jamaica, the most powerful union in Jamaica? Am I saying too much? Sorry. Right, let's hear from the president-elect of the JTA, Mrs. LaSonia Harrison. She's going to say something, but first, let's tell you about her. She currently serves as a chief servant. That's a key word there, servant. Chief servant of St. Faith's Primary School in Glengoff, St. Catherine, and as we have indicated, President-elect of the Jamaica Teachers Association. She's a trained graduate of the Shortwood Teachers College. She holds a Master of Arts in Supervision from the Western Carolina, I beg your pardon, Western Carolina University. She has served the education sector for 15 years, 12 of which were dedicated to serving the young ladies at Holy Childhood High School prior to occupying her current post. She's passionate about education and all matters relating to the sector. She's a true patriot, one who has never been desirous of living anywhere else in the world other than this rock, Jamaica. And she has pledged to the Lord that her skills and competencies that have, for the most part, been honed here will in turn be used to build this nation. It is her prayer and commitment to keep working that our country's original mandate be fulfilled to its fullest potential, that Jamaica may, under God, increase in beauty, fellowship, and prosperity, and play her part in advancing the whole human race. Here's Mrs. LaSonia Harrison to play her part in this JPC Virtual Productivity Forum. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Malcolm. Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure being here.
We also have on the panel Senior Representative in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, Dr. Tamika Benjamin. She's the National Mathematics Coordinator, Tertiary Support Officer at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. In her capacity, Dr. Benjamin is responsible for the development and implementation of policy designed to improve the teaching and learning of mathematics in Jamaica. Dr. Benjamin also supports the work of the ministry through the tertiary unit by managing the tertiary personnel unit and the tertiary students assistance program. For the past 25 years, she has served the Jamaican education system at all levels. 25 years, ooh. She hardly looks 16. Dr. Benjamin, well done. But she has served for the past 25 years the Jamaican education system at all levels as classroom teacher, principal, teacher, educator, and researcher. She played a critical role in the establishment of the Caribbean Center of Excellence in Mathematics, a research institute of the Mico University College, where she served as director for a period of 2 years and conducted research on pre-service teacher education as part of the International Comparative Study of Mathematics Teacher Education. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, wherever you are in the world, we just introduced to you Dr. Tamika Benjamin.
Thank you.
Good to... Oh, we're ready now for the... Oh, I get you. Oh, I have to get used to the signals. The minister would love to stay with us, the Minister of State in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, but you know how it is. Lots of meetings, discussions, engagements. We're grateful that he has been able to spend a few minutes with us, and we thank you very much, Minister Xavier Main, for your time, and we wish you all the best for the rest of the day. But I'm sure whatever you do after this will be done well, because you would have been energized by the high level of productivity in this room. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. No, we're not through. We still have a lot of ground to cover. And we want to tell you about a couple of our other panelists. We know we're all anxious to get into the meat of the matter, but context is important. And so that's exactly what we're doing right now. So you have an idea of the context in which this forum is being held. So, and of course, the players. Our next player, in a good way, is the president of iCreate Institute, a software developer, product designer, and teacher. He has a wide range of experience spanning from software development in early stage startups in South Florida to consulting as a digital product designer. As a graduate himself of a coding boot camp, he brings first-hand experience of the opportunities skills-based training programs can present and how they can be used to create, right? You create, I create, we all create. Hello, Dominic Summers.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We are ready now to hear about the managing director of Heart NSTA. She has been acting in the capacity of managing director of the Heart NSTA Trust, formerly Heart Trust NTA. Yes, those of you who are abroad and wondering, is that a new institution in Jamaica? No, it's been newly repositioned, rebranded, repurposed, and ready to take on all the challenges of the future and grasp the opportunities just as well. And so since our next presenter has been serving in this capacity since April 12, 2021, and has served in her substantive post as Senior Director for Corporate Services since September 3, 2018. Her association with the agency spans more than 25 years. That seems to be a magic number this afternoon. Another 25-year veteran, commencing in 1995. She has held several senior management positions within Heart Trust NTA and the wider education training sector. She's a former director, principal of the Heart College of Beauty Services. And so she knows the secret to beauty, no wonder. Right, and served as coordinator of alternative secondary transitional education programs whilst on secondment to the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. Please say hello and welcome to Novlet Denton Prince. Welcome,
Thank
Mrs.
you.
Denton Prince. Good to
Thanks
have
for
you
having me.
on board. And so now, not quite ready to hear from those parents and students and, okay, all right. All right, so let's get the ball rolling then. So we have heard from Tamar. We haven't heard from our other panelists just yet. So now would be a good time to have a word with Dr. Tamika Benjamin, or at least to have her say a few words at the start. Considering all that we have heard thus far in this forum, what's going through your mind, Dr. Benjamin?
So thank you again, and thanks for having me. There's just so much to consider. The importance of our human capital as a nation, and the fact that we have, many of our children have been significantly affected over the last 18 to 19 months by our need to shift our approach to teaching and learning. And while we've been able to pivot and provide opportunities online, we do know that there are, and as well as create a number of other opportunities for remote learning, whether through television or radio. We know that while they are there are other factors that are likely impacting that learning experience. Simple things like power cuts and disrupting the ability of students to interact with whatever the learning resources or the platform they're engaging. We also recognize the challenge we present for parents, because now there's an additional pressure. There is an additional demand. You know, we would normally take children to school and we know they will be there for a period of time. But now they're interacting at home. And for those who didn't have the privilege, and I consider it somewhat of a privilege, to work from home, that would have created another set of challenges. So I think it's really important for us to sit and really continue to reflect on what this last year would have done to our children, as well as begin to plan how we will make up for the time, the interrupted time. I don't think I can say lost time, but the interrupted time that they would have experienced when we get back to whatever normalcy looks like at the end of this period.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Benjamin. let's find out from Mrs. Lasonia Harrison, President-elect of the JTA. Uh, with all that's been happening more recently, we've had some schools now doing face-to-face. Is it possible to have productive, engaging sessions virtually? What determines whether those sessions are effective, as opposed to after a while the student moves from in front of the tablet and or changes the program on the screen, etc.? Are we expecting too much as far as online learning is concerned?
Well, certainly the findings from the productivity gap analysis would have reiterating some of the challenges that we would have shared as an association and would have cemented what it is that we do know. The students themselves, as well as the educators, did say that certainly online learning is not the best modality. At this time, I think, as a nation, we were certainly caught off guard. We were not prepared to do that pivoting or transitioning on a whole scale. So there are few successes. There are schools within our education system that it was a breeze, transition. But certainly we know when we look at the whole picture and when we look at online learning, especially for students at the early childhood, primary, secondary levels, even up to 11th grade, technical subjects, there are certainly those myriad of challenges that would have impeded the ease in transition of and the sharing of teaching and learning content. That screen between the child and the teacher, we weren't used to it. So it is a getting used to. The other variables affecting that space, the type of gadget, as the analysis report, the findings show, the type of gadget that they had access to, both on the teacher's part and the students as well. Because I wrote interestingly when I made a little jotting to say that the educators said they had the resources, but then I note earlier that majority of the responses came from a particular demographic and part of the island, and that is significant to be considered. You know, but when you take the whole picture, most teachers or several teachers did not necessarily have a reliable laptop. They still don't. Persons would have been using their own resource. The tablets that I know persons will make reference to was a negotiated benefit by the Jamaica Teachers Association. So it was not something that was it was not necessarily given to us by the Ministry of Education. But outside of that, the research shows that the tablet is certainly not an effective tool for facilitating teaching and learning in the online space, neither for the student nor for the teacher. Because when you start using the Jamboard and start using the other software applications that are available, the manipulation, the tablet does not give you that opportunity to do so. The laptop facilitates that much better, you know. So there are just so many, but the recommendations there as listed, they're spot on, and certainly things that we can all agree on and that the association has spoken to over the year and before.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mrs. Lasonia Harrison. Dominic Summers, technology is supposed to help us to be more efficient and indeed more productive, supposed to help enhance productivity. From your position in the field of information and communications technology, what is the difference between those who are able to achieve higher levels of productivity using digital devices as opposed to those who struggle?
So I think it's several things. I mean, we're talking about a multi-headed beast when we look at it. We're also looking at exposure, previous exposure. I think one of the fantastic things that we've seen in the last 18 months is that technology has given us the ability to conduct some of our work, conduct our classes safely. First and foremost, the priority has been to not get COVID. And I think we have to realize that a lot of the technology that we're using and the Zooms, the Microsoft Teams, the Google Classrooms have served their job to the point of allowing us to continue in some essence while keeping that safe distance, so first and foremost. But we see the disparity in terms of students and in terms of people who are already exposed and already had these devices, already had laptops, already had high-powered tablets, that could allow them to do a lot of these things, and how much of their work and how much of their life they were previously conducting using this technology. So it's not so much a matter of has there been new technology and what the resources are, but it's also a matter of the resourcefulness and the usefulness and your ability to put it into use and to practice using it even before we were called upon and the entire world shifted to virtual, remote in and of itself.
It's the human element, but these are the same children, students in particular, who are hooked to these devices, playing games, and they're so focused and excited. And is it that the packaging, we perhaps need to relook at how we're packaging education on these devices and using other resources?
And I mean, I guess it's also a case of because it was used in a certain context. Know that the entire context of how I'm using my laptop at home has shifted. The entire context of my screen time has shifted from something that was done for pleasure to now something that's kind of being forced upon me, something that I'm being mandated in a sense to do. I mean, especially in the case of the young children, when we see the results of the survey, primary school students overwhelmingly were not enjoying the learn from home situation, whereas the tertiary students, would have enjoyed it a lot more. So I think it's also the shift, and in some cases the stark shift from I used to be looking at a screen in the moment of enjoying. I'm watching a YouTube video, I'm playing a game, I'm chatting with friends, and now that has completely shifted to this is now how I conduct my schoolwork and my business, and so I think the contrast also plays a big role in what you're talking about there.
And these free courses that you're offering, will it help those who are having that kind of difficulty?
Well, it's more screen time, maybe not video game screen time as the younger end of the spectrum is requiring, but I think it definitely helps bring about, as we've coined it, right, digital awareness. So we have so many terms that we throw around when we talk about digital, when we talk about digital transformation, and to kind of break down what does this mean, what do these jobs look like, what does this industry look like, can I chart a path forward through a digital skill set that fits me, that suits a lifestyle that I would like to live, and to bring an introduction and to bring a general awareness around these types of things. So as it relates to the younger students who are currently not enjoying their school from home situations, I don't know if we've quite found the magic bullet for that one yet, but I think on the older end of the spectrum, it will give a lot of perspective into how they can turn this screen time into productive time, and even further than that, into lifestyles and lives that they could see themselves living.
Right. Thank you. I saw the animation. It was all over your face, Mrs. Lasonia Harrison. You wanted to come back in at some point?
No,
Just checking.
No, not necessarily at all.
Sure. Oh, please! I was coming to you next to find out to find out what all that has been happening has meant to you. What are your takeaways over these past 20 months or so that we've been contending with this pandemic? How has that impacted the productivity levels within the Heart NSTA?
Before I move on to the productivity level, I wanted to pivot on the question that Dominic just responded to. I agree with you when you said that, is it something wrong with the packaging of the education system? And I want to think so. I want to think why the interest levels might be a little low is because how we package the information for the students might be a little flat. I'm thinking educators may want to have to think more of gamification as far as education is concerned. How they turn the lectures and the lessons, be creative and innovative to put it in a game package, so to speak, to hold the interests of the students. You know, that is something we can look on as far as education is concerned, to what extent we can use it. We may not be able to overdo it because you have to be careful when you're talking about outcomes and deliverables that you're looking at, and you might not want to turn the class into a whole game arcade. But at the same time, there are aspects of the technology that you can use to make the lectures and the lessons a little more interesting, to keep their attention and to hold them just as if they were playing a game, that kind of attention. You also asked about the productivity levels as far as HEART is concerned. HEART, like any other organization, has been impacted by COVID-19. You know, we are going through the trenches. We are not out of the pandemic as yet. So some of the things that are happening now started 13 months ago, and we still continue to feel some of the effects of them. You know, we as an organization had to shift our working hours based on protocols, and we find that it forced a number of our employees to be much more creative in how they deliver the lessons. You might be saying to yourself, Mr. Malcolm, how can that happen in a HEART? It's a skills training organization. How do you transition to online learning? But we managed to do so. You know, there are simulation exercises that we incorporate in the training. And there are also very, very creative ways in which we embrace our assessment of students. So we are pivoting, but of course, there has been some incremental impact, negative of course, on productivity levels as far as COVID-19 pandemic is concerned, not different from any other organization. We have found also that in our training, there are certain skill sets or there are certain skills that are more in demand right now. And we're using this quote unquote downtime to prepare and to build the capacity and get the necessary resources to be able to deliver some of these courses. IT is very popular, as Dominic can tell you. You know, that's where the direction is as far as demand is concerned. So we're talking about digital literacy, we're talking about optoelectronics, we're talking about analytics. Those are the kinds of skill areas that we're bombarded with as it relates to demands. And so we're in the process of being resourced in order to deliver these programs because the demand is so overwhelming now.
How do we, Tamar Nelson, avoid the feeling of, well, this pandemic has to end at some point, so let's just wait it out and do what we can do in the meantime, but nothing major because you don't know what is around the corner. What kind of attitude, what kind of approach should we be taking even as we continue to contend with COVID-19 while trying to maintain an outlook beyond the pandemic, and not just trying, but taking actions now that will have far-reaching and long-lasting impact going forward?
Well, I think you have answered the question in what you just said just now. Is to keep acting, to keep going forward, to keep moving ahead. And we know that, yes, this is a crisis, but the worst thing we can do is to pause, right? There are opportunities within a crisis, and what we have to do is to really take the time to step back, look and see where those opportunities are and to capitalize on them and to make the shifts necessary. It's not, you know, when we look at where we are, if we just stop, others will go right ahead and we'll be left behind or out, right? So Brittany mentioned earlier that when you talk about productivity, it's continuous improvement. So if we are doing the same things now that we were doing pre-pandemic, then something is wrong. We're not improving our productivity. we have to constantly be adapting, being flexible, being agile to the changes in the environment, and the environment has changed. And so we also have to change. And that change would mean changes in the way how we do things, the way how we manage and utilize the resources that are available. Possibly we a lot of the platforms that we are using today, we had them pre the pandemic, but we weren't utilizing them fully. And now the world is digital, the future is digital, and the future is also hybrid. So we have to also take into consideration persons who are remote and how we conduct business and interactions and education in that new realm, and to equip ourselves with the knowledge, the skills, and the skills may be technical, but they're also soft skills that needs to be considered, which would include, critical thinking, problem solving, and in the workplace, it's not just leading, you're now more coaching, right? Now you're dealing with persons probably in different countries, teams in different locations. How do you manage and keep everybody connected, collaborating, and improving productivity? So, with a hybrid situation, collaborating and getting those innovative ideas are a little bit harder. And in a hybrid situation, you also have the challenge of persons that blur between work and home, between school and home. That divide isn't there anymore. So there has to be changes and approaches in how we look at things, as was mentioned earlier, so that we can actually not burn out, but to survive and thrive in this dispensation.
But what's the evidence so far, whether here in Jamaica or elsewhere? Can you really be productive working from home?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And,
I mean, the distractions notwithstanding, the refrigerator nearby, etc.
It's a different approach. So you're going to hear the dog barking and the neighbor cursing somebody, probably using some words you wouldn't want others to hear. But now we have to say, okay, probably you set up a little room that, persons have done modifications so that they can have soundproof areas, or have seen parents put up signs on their door, or daddy's in a meeting right now, don't come in. So, but I think persons now are more acclimatized to work.
No, what I'm actually getting at, and I don't mean to cut you, is the self-discipline that is required. I mean, it's all well and good to say, yes, we're working from home, and we're going to work even better. But then you can't help but fall into the home trap, quite frankly. So, Mrs. Harrison?
That poses a particular challenge for us as teachers. Because prior to the pandemic, you had 2, 3 children of your own. You send them off to their space for learning, and then you take on your task of monitoring and facilitating learning of those entrusted in your care. Now, when it is a teacher is at home with your 2 and children of different age levels, babies, early childhood, primary level, and high school, secondary. I have a friend. She's at home with her daughter. Now, this is a no-nonsense parent. And her child's teacher calls her to say, your daughter has not been online for 2 days. And the parent and the child is sitting in the same room. Now, she's very busy teaching her students, and her child has the computer.
Her business is spoiling.
Her computer is up, and she's sitting in front of the computer, but she's doing other things. Now, if we know how dedicated teaching is, and especially the challenge that it brought online when you're saying to that child, when it says pains when I would go in to supervise my teachers, just to support them, and I hear John, answer the question. not at John to answer the question. And the teacher said, Miss, you have to have a bottle of water with you, during class, because you're there calling for this child, and this is primary level students, and you're calling and no response. It is time consuming. It can be a very frustrating process. And so for teachers, so while for other sectors, maybe it is a little bit more, but even the parents are crying out loud. I had some past schoolmate of mine reaching out. She said, no have any teacher who can come in, and this not working. I need to do my job. I cannot supervise my child while I am undertaking my duties as in my professional space. So it is really a challenge. So this staying from home to work, it is not necessarily compatible in all career forms and all areas. It is a challenge for the teachers.
And of course, the other component there, Dr. Benjamin, has to do with all that we've been learning about learning loss or learning gaps. And I'm dreading, if I'm still alive a few years from now, dreading on the one hand, and on the other hand, sort of curious to find out what will become of this generation of children who have been so significantly impacted by the vagaries of COVID-19. And a lot of them were already struggling, not least of all with mathematics, Dr. Benjamin. How can we pull this back? Can we, or do we have to, will we find ourselves in a situation where we're always trying to catch up, but not being able to because of the gap getting wider every day?
Well, let me answer the question. Can we? And I'd answer that by saying we have to. I don't think we have a choice. The issue of learning loss, or I think for us, we try to think a lot more of the gaps, which really would be contributed to those students who get on today, not tomorrow, miss 2 or 3 days, or they may be on and they miss half of a lesson. So you really have no sense of how much they have actually accessed. And that will create issues in terms of what they've learned. You started the concept, they missed out, or they came in at the end part and they missed the beginning, and that sort of a thing. There are a number of things we're going to have to do, and I think the most important thing is that this is going to require home, school, and clearly the ministry working very closely together. We have to continue to assess where each child is, and that's probably the greatest challenge, but I think we're up to the task of it, because it means that all of us are in the same class with the same teacher. All of us are at totally different places because our experiences may have been different. I think we've started working out a framework that will help schools, school principals, teachers, be able to assess and then figure out how they're going to support each other. We continue to look at the curriculum. That's going to be very important. We'll have to determine how we manage the time that has been lost. Remember, it's not the entire time, but we have lost some, and how we will help to get our students back on track. There are lessons to be learned from other contexts around the world. And we continue to look at what some countries are doing. Some have modified their curriculum by eliminating or removing some subject areas from the teaching interface for a period to focus on the core. And we know that math and language literacy, reading, those areas are very important. And the research shows that if we're able to deal with the gaps that are created in those areas, we would have laid a very solid foundation for the children to catch up in the other areas. And we can find other ways to deal with those. And that's a strategy that the ministry is looking on, has looked on, and has incorporated in our, I'm going to call our intermediate strategy, because we will have to pivot again once we get to a stage where more of our schools are operating in a face-to-face context.
Still a lot of work to be done. I gather we're ready to hear from the teachers, students, and parents. So let's take a look now as we continue this Jamaica Productivity Center JPC Virtual Productivity Forum. And the theme, once again, productivity, COVID-19, and human capital development. Let's hear from the children, the teachers, and the students.
I find it more challenging than rewarding.
I find the online experience as well as the learning challenging.
I would say there were some advantages.
Rewarding in terms of the flexibility that we have to pre-record videos, to engage the student in utilizing the technologies that are available.
Because of the diverse areas from where children come from to attend school in the mornings, it afforded them the opportunity to be punctual and to reduce the hassle of travel. The greatest challenge was that the students had and the teachers had internet connectivity issues.
Connectivity problems, all of that.
Sometimes it's just the device itself.
You know, your battery needs time to charge, but you don't have sufficient time for it to get some charge. You go to your other classes.
And of course, some of us have family disturbance.
Some students were distracted during our Google Meet lessons because their parents did not have a dedicated space in the home for online learning.
Challenging because my internet connection is not consistent.
Can be rewarding and suitable for some learners.
I have spent many hours encouraging students to attend online classes.
The school, didn't have an online process that was implemented to facilitate learning. And as a result of that, I decided that I was going to go the route of having someone come to homeschool the kids. So the online experience, it was non-existent for my kids.
Distraction from social media. Of course, a lot of times when parents would think that their students were in class and focused, they were pretty much watching status, posting status, being on Instagram and many other platforms.
Accountability for students' work is harder when you can't always tell if your students are completing their assessments independently.
Well, there are some of us who heard just now what we always knew, and there are others who are saying, what, really, seriously? Yes, indeed, this is reality, and which is why it's so important for us to have this forum and to play our part through this forum to sharpen the response to the deficiencies and shortcomings. And so what we want to do at this stage is to get a sense of how do we, I don't get the impression necessarily that there is a setup or a setting in which there's a structured approach in terms of recognizing where we are as a country at the macro level, and then narrowing down the identifying those key gaps, shortcomings, failings, etc. And then now to get, we have a lot of competent Jamaicans, get a couple of teams together, both within the system and those who can help to support the system, so that we can stop, as I like to say, stop the bleeding, right? If nothing else, as opposed to sliding away. But surely there have been some positives coming out of this, or perhaps some positives that with negative connotations. Because, for example, if I am being tested in a way which is unlike the professional way, where you're not getting help to the point where somebody's doing the work for you and then you pass it off as yours. We don't know the extent to which that is that is widespread or just few and far between. So well, maybe Mrs. Lasonia Harrison would like to take that one from your standpoint, President-elect, and as an educator, based on what you have seen, heard, and experienced. Are some of our children benefiting from grades that are perhaps even surprising them?
Oh, Lord. I mean, you know, I currently serve as a principal for a multi-grade school. And when my teachers and I would meet on a Friday to review the week that was and to plan for the week to come, oh, they would lament. And even when we were to do the diagnostic tests, it was a challenge because aside from the connectivity and we know even when you're in class and the children are doing the test and the teacher, we say, come to the Google Meet, and the teacher is supervising, you hear the parents. And no matter how you say to them, you need to stop, allow the child to. So a lot of grades that we have written down. So our cumulative records for last year, we actually put that in a special folder.
Ouch.
Yes, because those grades were really not indicative of the student's ability. And one of the privilege we had before we got instructions of full shutdown, we called in our students and took them in small. It's a small school anyway because we have 51 students. So we called them in on a small basis, and we did our own internal diagnostic tests before the ministry gave us the mandate for their diagnostic test. So we were able to compare what we did with what the students did in the online setting, and wow, magical grades, you know, sailing 100%. So we know that there is certainly challenges. The older ones, of course, they have their other devices and whatever, and you know, they're doing other things that certainly we cannot embrace, you know, ethically and morally. And so that's another issue. There are those schools who have the resources and the wherewithal that they're able to employ some of the higher level technology to monitor that process so they can actually see or know if the students are deviating from, you know. So, but all of that, logistics, certainly. As a country, are we able to take on that wholesale? I don't think we're there yet. And so the face-to-face is a reality. And while we do learn from developed countries, we certainly have to take our realities into consideration when we craft that framework with educators at the table, front and present, and also with the supporting team, as you're saying, as we chart the way forward if we're to increase our productivity.
Thank you, Mrs. Harrison. Dominic Summers, does the technology exist that can sufficiently guard against cheating at whatever level of the school system? Or
Yes, I mean, it does, and it has been utilized. I think it's costly. Yes, I mean, I see your mouth in that there. There's a cost to it as well. But I also think it begs a question of kind of a shift in how we think about what's the end goal of our education efforts here. Is our end goal to prepare somebody for a career? Is our end goal to prepare somebody for life? Or is our end goal to test and pass somebody? Right? And I think, you know, a big way that we look at it, and I'm pretty sure this is how Hart and NSTA would look at it as well, is we're more focused on what will you be able to do? How will you be able to provide for yourself? How will you be able to meet the challenges that life will throw at you? In my time as a software engineer, it was expected that Google was open, right? I wasn't expected sitting down in the office that I would be able to write code out of my head, right? I'm on site, I'm using resources, I'm utilizing, I'm asking questions, I'm asking of my coworkers. And I think there's a shift, you know, when I was in school, when you ask questions and when you Google things, you're cheating. And in my professional life, when I'm asking questions and Googling things, it's looked at as a superpower, right? So it's a large disparity almost in what it is we need and looking at what is truly the end result and the end goal of our education efforts here.
Yeah. And I'm going to bring you back in, Tamar, in a little while, because we need to get an idea of the follow-up action. It's one thing to do the survey and to present it. It's another thing to recognize the role that you can play or that you play as Jamaica Productivity Center in impacting in a positive way the whatever negative outcomes we have been experiencing. But don't start responding yet, because I wanted to find out how Heart Trust NSTA sees itself impacting this treacherous environment to the extent that we're able to pull it back, to the extent that we're able to make some headway, as opposed to, like Sisyphus, pushing this rock up a hill only for it to keep rolling down, rolling back.
It's a large one. For Heart Trust, it's a little different from the regular education system. We're competency-based. It's about what you can do, as Dominic has said. And so even our methods of assessments, they're very different. You know, we're not confined to a test. It's about your skill set. And there are so many creative ways that we have been using to assess persons' competence. You see them doing the job or see them doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so even though some of the issues and the challenges that were outlined by Sonia and Tamika, we do have them, but not to a great extent like what is being experienced in the education system. Not as treacherous as is now in the education system. We are predominantly adults, persons that the education system is dealing with this target group. They're children, really, you know, very malleable ages. These are adults, more focused, more workforce, trying to be workforce ready to earn, and so their approach and their thinking to training is very, very, very different. So we're able at Heart to introduce different methods to train and also to assess, and find that it is very receptive. When I look at the numbers that Brittany had demonstrated a while ago, if we were to look at just predominantly Heart students, we would have some of the switches the other way around. Just a few persons are still wanting to come face to face. The reality is, with us at Heart, our target group, these are persons who are in the workforce, most of them. And so they welcome not to be in school. A matter of fact, they're more towards work-based training than being in a classroom. And that has been our dilemma for some time. So we have been shifting the focus to more work-based training than a classroom setting. So this works well for us, for our target group. So, as I've said, the numbers for Heart would be shifting if the research was predominantly Heart. We didn't see COVID coming, but the gaps that have been exposed by COVID, not that COVID created the gaps, they were there before. The gaps that have been exposed by COVID just make it even clearer to us where we really need to focus on as far as training and certification in Heart is concerned. We're not about setting up classrooms. We're more about collaborating and partnerships and to see how we get the training in the workforce rather than a classroom setting. And we find that that is working for us. For the education system, it might be a little different and might be much more challenging. And then that's where investments have to come in and partnerships have to come in, because some of the kinds of technology that they will need to address the challenges that were identified, they're going to be costly, but we don't have to bear the cost if we know how to partner. Each and every one of the challenges that has been exposed a while ago, there is a software that can address it, right, Dominic? Each and every one, but they're very expensive. So it's about how we collaborate and how we partner, you know, as a country to put systems in place and to put resources in place to address some of these, what we know call challenges. I want to think them as real hurdles, not necessarily a treacherous challenge, but hurdles that we can we can go over if we have the right strategies and approach, collaboration and partnership. Tamar earlier on mentioned something, and this is what I want to bring to the table also, Mr. Malcolm. It's about the skills that we need in this COVID. I hate to say post-COVID because we're not post-COVID. We're still in the trenches in this period. For us, in addition to teaching technical skills, what we have been doing to build resilience is to augment the technical skills with some soft skills, which are helping, or you teach people to manage themselves, which is very, very important. How you lead persons, the kinds of leadership that we're looking for in schools and in corporate right now is different from the leadership in 2019 or 2018. 2019-18, we were boasting contingency leadership where you lead based on situation. Right now, we have to deal with agile leadership. How you collaborate, how you partner to get the work done. That kind of leadership that looks at building and encouraging, as Tamar says, motivating and coaching persons and nurturing. That's where we need to go. So how we lead in these institutions, we need to change that mindset also. So, and this is a grand opportunity to do that in this COVID trench that we are currently in.
Yes. I think we have another Vox Pop coming up, but just so we don't forget, Tamar, the follow-up action, having done the research, surely it's not going to just end up on a shelf somewhere to say you did the research, is it?
No. And, one of the things we have to do is to rethink and refocus our strategies. And we have to do that constantly. So once we use the data to make decisions based on facts and not opinions. And one of the things that we have done, and I think Minister mentioned it, we have already started our discussions with Heart Trust NTA. And we are looking to continue our collaborations. We have had a very close relationship in over the years, and we hope to strengthen that so that we can, actually get productivity into the workplaces and into the minds and hearts of persons so that they see it as a part of what they do and to understand it a little bit better. We are also looking to expand the program, our internship program. We see probably close to 30 interns from various institutions per year at the Productivity Center. We always have students with us where we transfer knowledge to them, get them hands-on experience of how productivity works. And it has been a win-win collaboration so far. We collaborate with the University of Technology, the University of West Indies, and different other programs throughout the years, and it has been truly rewarding for them and for us. We also want to roll out, and we have the plans in place to collaborate, and the Ministry of Education has shown interest in this collaboration to roll out the productivity clubs in schools. So we have tested productivity in schools, and the energy is just phenomenal. When you get those minds together working on a particular area of improvement, the results are just astonishing. We did it a few years ago, and schools were able to see reductions in electricity costs, paper costs, water usage going down just by implementing a productivity program in the schools. And so we want to expand this so that more schools can benefit. And our innovation competitions, we tested it this year, and Minister Min shared some of those findings from that. And what we want to do is to really get persons on board to help to sponsor some of these ideas so that they can be tested and implemented so we can really reap the benefits of some of these competitions. So we are also partnering to boost our research activities with the universities and other research partners to further look at measurement. We want to develop that measurement culture in Jamaica at every level so that we can be very targeted and specific. So it won't end here. This is just the beginning, and we continue to focus on human capital and productivity growth at the Productivity Center.
Every time somebody mentions measurement, I think of that quotation. I think it's Dunwebby, I've heard with it. What gets measured gets done. What gets measured gets done. I see the hand going up, Mrs. Harrison. We have a Vox Pop coming up. Hold that one for us, please, until afterwards. And also, think of your big idea, please. What is your big idea to efficiently, proficiently, effectively, and productively help to drive Jamaica out of this pandemic in a better position, to a better place? Perhaps you could give that some thought. Yeah, that big idea that could make a difference, and within a reasonable space of time as well. Right? So as you think about that, and as Mrs. Harrison jots down her question, I know she won't forget it, or her input, she won't forget it. So we'll come back to that afterwards. But we're going to another break as you continue to listen to this Jamaica Productivity Center, of course, under the auspices of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. It's a virtual productivity forum, and it's being broadcast on JNN and Power 106 FM, plus all the social media platforms are up and running for the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, Jamaica Productivity Center, JNN as well, etc., etc. And of course, check out the iCreate digital awareness course, the digital awareness course. Make sure you get in on one of those. About 200 or less left. Oh, it's 500, but I gather they've been going very quickly. Yes. So I hear we're under 200 now.
Fantastic.
All right. Let's go to the Vox Pop and come back in just a moment.
My child is an independent learner who is able to navigate the online space quite adeptly and responsibly. But my biggest challenge was watching him struggle in the beginning and at other times throughout the year to cope with the disconnect and isolation that can accompany online learning.
So given the challenges that existed with accessing online learning and given the unsuitability of online learning for one of my two children, I decided that homeschooling would have been a better option for them. So the lack of online learning pushed me in that direction, which worked out to be more beneficial for them.
Students and teachers need to have functional devices paramount. Secondly, internet connectivity needs to be greater. The poor internet connection that is available in this area and sometimes is non-existent in other areas cannot allow for effective learning.
I think the greatest resource that is missing at this time is e-books. I mean, all textbooks for students, I would love for these to be in electronic format and be made available to all of us teachers as well as students.
Supervision may be required for students will depend on various factors ranging from the needs of the learner to the type of activities in which they are engaged. Now, as we can imagine, students who are younger, students who have learning challenges or special needs, or students who require more teacher-directed instruction will require additional supervision in comparison to others. And this supervision, I believe, should be more active rather than passive.
Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us for this Ministry of Labor and Social Security Jamaica Productivity Center Virtual Productivity Forum. The theme, Productivity, COVID-19 and Human Capital Development. You met our panelists earlier on, so we're continuing the discussions. Remember, the social media pages are available to you, so feel free to post your questions, your comments, at ProductivityJA on Twitter, at Jamaica Productivity on Instagram, Jamaica Productivity Center on Facebook. You can send an email to jpc@mlss.gov.jm, jpc@mlss.gov.jm. You can join the conversation by commenting and asking questions on the live streams on the, once again, the JPC and Ministry of Labor and Social Security YouTube and Facebook pages. And if you or your organization would like to partner with the JPC on upcoming initiatives, or if you would like to become a productivity ambassador, that sounds good, call 876-922-1598, 876-922-1598, or send an email to jpc@mlss.gov.jm. The Jamaica Productivity Center, achieving Jamaica's productivity potential. Coming back from that break, Mrs. Lasonia Harrison, you wanted to comment.
Yes, sir. As I heard Miss Nelson spoke about, the after from based on the information gathered, I would like to think that if our human capital is our greatest resource, then I hear the partnership with Hard Trust, NSTA, and the clubs and stuff, but as a nation, we really need to sit down. This is the opportunity. The pandemic has provided us with the opportunity to really sit at the table and craft a way forward re-education for all Jamaicans. What the pandemic did was to just highlight for us all the inequities that are in our system, colonial legacies coming right down. That's what it did for us. And so we need to treat with the symptoms. We have to go to the root. As a nation, we need to look at what we invest in education if we truly value our human resource and want to increase productivity. So we must go to, we say get it right at the start. We must treat with our early childhood education. It is foundational. The issues that we face coming throughout the system are as a result of the foundation on which we are laying. So we will continue to be laying blocks on a faulty building. And so we really need to pay more attention there. Our president has been speaking to that, and teachers are critical to the recovery process. There is no going around it. So while Miss spoke about Hard Trust NTA at the adult level, certainly they're able to embrace the online learning. But when we think about those who have been entrusted in our care, we are parentis loco intenant. So those children that come to us, we have been tasked with nurturing, guiding, modeling for same, and online cannot replace that. We are social beings, and so we're in need of that space where it is that the teachers interface with the students, with the needed human resource, infrastructural resource, and financial resourcing. As a nation, we can't afford for another eventuality or another pandemic to come upon us, and we are not in a state of preparedness in order to make that pivoting. Few schools did that successfully, but we certainly would want to be in a better state should anything else come up in the future.
Yes, go ahead, Tamar.
To what was just said, what we're doing here is just a snippet, right? Coming out of the COVID-19 Labor Market Task Force, there was a huge list of recommendations for each partners as it relates to human capital and education. And all parties have been given tasks, specific. A lot of consultation took place and detailed analysis to see, okay, what needs to be done now. That's going to affect the labor market, not only now, but in the future. And of course, we agree with you 100% that we have to look at the full gamut to ensure that we are ready, not just now, because today is COVID, next week might be a hurricane or earthquake or some social unrest, etc. The disruptions are real. We're in that age now. And so we have to plan ahead and be ready and have those strategies in place. And we are 100% on board where that is concerned.
All right, how about some of the big ideas now? In terms of based on our experience, our work, what we have seen, what we've been exposed to, what we've been engaged in. Uh, it's a time to search ourselves and to search the deepest recesses of our minds to come up with ideas, new ways of doing things, better ways, smarter ways, etc. Any ideas from our panelists that, yes, go ahead.
No,
Dr. Benjamin.
I think what comes to mind, I reflected on that, is our need to recognize we create a system that almost is a hybrid of this experience. Yes, there is a need to make sure that we adequately cater to the students, the young ones. I mean, the research tells us that the online setting is not necessarily the most ideal for them. But I think there's also an opportunity to continue to work on creating this virtual space for learning. There are many students who are sick, students who are absent for school from short periods, a teacher, whatever. This will create that level of flexibility in the system. And I think sitting together to craft what that will look like, how we will have a mixture of our school spaces, clearly advanced to meet the needs of the 21st century, but also maintaining elements of this virtual space that will create a lot more flexibility in the system moving forward and a lot more resilience. Not just in the cases of potential pandemics or disasters, but even for little interruptions for an individual student or even a school. You never know what takes place, but you can continue to sustain learning or some form of learning. I think that's where we need to be going as a country.
Yes, go ahead, Dominic Summers.
Yeah, so, my take on it is that we really need to look at the digital transformation that our businesses, that our social services, that our government needs. And a business doesn't transform, people transform. And we have an opportunity right now to onboard our youth, to onboard persons who are at that cusp of leaving school, leaving formal education systems and entering this working world, which was already a difficult process. Pre-pandemic, that was a very hard thing to do in Jamaica and in the region. And I think we have to look specifically at those persons and see what opportunities we can open up for them, whether internships, whether apprenticeships, short-term training programs, and how they can be the ones to fill that gap in terms of what needs to be done to digitize our society. And the same problems that existed before the pandemic and the pandemic exacerbated. When we look at value creation throughout the world, we look at what's happening on the west coast of US and in the Northeast and throughout Europe, significant amounts of value are being created from very young people, from persons who don't have degrees, from persons who are not formally educated, but from persons who have followed a passion, have merged a passion with a technology, and have been able to meet the needs of a market. And we'll have to put more persons in a position to do that. That's what the startup culture is throughout the world. That's where we're seeing these incredible figures and values thrown around, some mind-numbing numbers truly in what's happening in some places in the world. And I don't think we need to follow the same path that we've seen other nations follow, because we have the opportunity to leapfrog. We have the opportunity to just go to what they're doing now and what's working. We don't have to make the same mistakes that they made. And I think we're looking at short-term training programs, vocational services, programs like Heart NSTA, programs like we have at iCreate. And these students that are leaving school 16, 17, that don't have a profession, that are not sure what they're doing with their life. And we all know what the old adage about idle hands and where that has led us already, and what we continue seeing happening in that respect. We have to meet it at the most critical point, and that's right when people are transitioning from child, teenager into adult. They need careers that they can rest their names upon.
Just before we come to the next big idea, we see a question coming from Professor Neville Ying. And the question is, improving productivity using the people-centered approach requires us to redefine what we are measuring before we measure. Could JPC, HEART, and MOE, as in Ministry of Education, comment on how they will do this? So, HEART, Mrs. Prince.
Measuring productivity. We have to define what is it that we're measuring, as Professor Ying is trying to say. And rightly so. If we're going to be guided as to what strategies we're going to be using going forward, those strategies must be guided by data analysis. And in order to analyze, we have to know exactly what we're measuring. Are we measuring the number of persons we're training, for example, in various courses, or are we measuring the impact of those training programs on productivity and development? So as it relates to heart, we may want to look a little deeper at some of the courses that we're currently offering, instead of just looking for number enrolled in the course, but what is the percentage of impact that the training in the various areas will have on the levels of productivity in this country. So that's one way we could look at adjusting our measurement variables, and we can then further better reposition our strategies and our resources in order to make sure that we are strategizing in the right way.
Tamar, on the part of the JPC.
Right, so thank you for that question, Prof. Ying. Prof. Ying is a friend of the JPC as well, and the president of the task force that dealt with the COVID-19 and human capital. And as it relates to the people, one of the things that we have to start with is to connect the people part of what we do to our strategies. And from that, develop, first of all, look at the objectives, what we want to accomplish. Look at the strategies, ensure that the people are connected to that. And then we look at what we need to measure and how we need to measure these. And, set targets, all of those good things. When it comes to measurement, it depends on what we're measuring, who is measuring, etc. But we know that we need to measure. It doesn't mean that we have to measure everything that exists. It may be some key factors. And I know one of the recommendations coming out of the task force is that JPC takes a lead in terms of helping persons to set up those measurement systems. And so we have to bolster our capacity as well to help to other institutions so we can spread that, how persons can do it. So we can spread that across and multiply and leverage the resources that we have internally. And that brings me to the big idea in terms of what we want to do at JPC. We are a team of all of 10 persons. And, that team is all very passionate about productivity, and that's why we're able to do what we do today. And one of the things that we want to do is to have many JPCs all around, to spread that, to multiply that we can have a productivity movement in Jamaica. And the only way we're going to do that is by building awareness and building the capacity, and also measuring to ensure that we are moving in the right direction. So that's something that we are pursuing. The board is currently looking to see how best we can leverage all of these the resources that we have to make this possible. And of course, as Novlet Denton Prince just mentioned, a lot of what we are doing, even though we are a much smaller organization than HEART, the same principle applies, where it's only through the collaborative efforts that we will be able to make this possible. So we are also looking to partner and collaborate with different institutions so that we can leverage all our resources to have Jamaica be the place to live, work, and do business.
And Dr. Benjamin, MOE was included there as well?
Well, I think we clearly have the responsibility of laying the foundation. I mean, once we determine the direction in which we want to see our human capital grow, we have to revisit, as we have been doing, what we do at the early childhood, primary and the secondary and the tertiary levels of the system to ensure that persons are where they need to be, that foundation is laid so that they can access the programs, whether it's through HEART or other tertiary avenues or other post-secondary avenues. So I think it's not just looking at the curriculum now in terms of the content, but the skills and the mindsets that we want our students to have. I mean, I heard in one of the Vox Pop a parent talking about a child being an independent learner. How much more of that do we need to create the level of productivity that's required? And how are we going to redesign and reorganize our teaching and learning experiences so that students have those skills and competencies far beyond the things we generally think about to help them to become productive citizens?
And so, Mrs. Harrison, have you given us your big idea yet?
Well, I think I wanted to make a contribution to the
The question from
yes, you know,
Professor Ying. Please go ahead.
if we are people-centered and we want to determine what is to be measured, I think we really need to look at our philosophy of education in this nation. What it is, what citizen are we desirous of producing through our education system? We need to revise our educational framework, and this is the opportunity to do so. Is the education system meeting the job market and the future of work? Should we be including competency-based assessment methodology from our earliest of levels? And so if it is, we are saying that because education, and there is the need for us to be in school, you know, because the moral compass and all of these things need to be shaped, because certainly scientists without a moral compass and ethic are usually go off the bend. And so we are in need of that stable individual in order to contribute to our national development. And so as a nation, the NSC has provided us with a transitioning to that, the 21st century skills, collaboration, creativity, and all of that. So there is some work, but we really need to sit down and determine as a nation what is our philosophy, and then it will inform, will we make the brave move of, rather than talk shop, but to really invest in education? Because as we go forward, as we embrace the blended modality, schools will need to be greatly resourced in order to facilitate that kind of exchange, for the teacher to be in the classroom, meeting the needs of those in front of him or her, as well as those who are at home for whatever reason they are and can't be in the space. Our schools are woefully, especially us at the multi-grade and the primary levels, we are in need of that injection of capital. That takes a public-private partnership, and so all hands really need to come to the table. Capri and the McKenzie report suggests that, you know, to treat with the immediate situation of those who we could not find and meeting those skill sets, that maybe we can entertain the use of trainee teachers and tutoring to get to support teachers in the current space, because there are several intervention strategies that we will have to put in place in order to lessen that gap that was further widened by the pandemic.
Yes. Well put. And so then, as we get ready to wrap, but that in and of itself is a big idea, because it calls for a student-centered approach, not getting the student to fit in with the system, but identifying, doing some kind of psychometric testing to get a sense of what kind of student is this, and then to create a learning program that complements the students' state of being. That is likely to be more effective. No doubt, as you said, rightly said, it's going to take resources, and a lot of it. But let's leave our viewers and listeners with some hope as we wrap. And who is going to lead us off in that regard? Hope springs eternal in the human breast.
Well, I'll take the first stab at that. But I think, in the last 18 months, as we've said so many times, it feels like there's been lost time. It feels like there's been less efficient use of time. And from our perspective and from the programs that we look at and from the skill sets that we look at, we want to say that there's a lot of hope, there's a lot of things that can be done in a short order to get persons to value creating positions in their life. Especially when we look at our youth who are so technologically adaptable. They love sitting in front of screens in some contexts, as we discussed already before. And I think if we can tap into the creativity that we know we have as a nation, that we see play out in certain areas, we can get that creativity being used across the board with technological advances augmenting our experience, not replacing us, not taking us out of whack altogether, but allowing us to bring that creativity to the forefront and to create value while doing it and to be properly compensated, and to let that flow through society. So a child that's growing up in Trelawney or in Westmoreland knows that they don't have to move to Montego Bay, or they don't have to move to Kingston to have a fulfilling career and to have something that they feel that they have contributed to society doing. And we see that as completely possible.
Finally, from the Productivity Center, Tamar.
Well, when I heard you speak of, that hope, I recall, and I will just read another definition of productivity. And it was coined in the 1950s, and it says that productivity is above all a state of mind. It is an attitude that seeks the continuous improvement of what exists. It is a conviction that one can do better today than yesterday, and that tomorrow will be better than today. Furthermore, it requires constant efforts to adapt economic activities to ever-changing conditions, and it is the application of new theories and methods. It is the firm belief in the progress of humanity.
I hope you're going to circulate that. Yeah, that should go viral.
Yes. And it was the 1950s, and I think it's very relevant today, that we just have to continue to improve and to always look to make tomorrow better than today, and that today is better than yesterday, and to keep adapting. So there is no one size fits all. There's no magic bullet, silver bullet, so we just need to keep going.
Indeed. Let us keep going. Let us keep moving. Let us keep doing. Let us keep playing our part to advance the welfare of the whole human race. Thank you so much to our panelists, Tamar Nelson, Dr. Tamika Benjamin, Mrs. Lasonia Harrison, Dominic Summers, and Mrs. Novlet Denton Prince, Mrs. Novlet Denton Prince. Thank you very much. Thanks to the entire team of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security and the Jamaica Productivity Center. Thanks to the team at JNN. Thank you very much. Thanks as well to the team at Power 106 FM. No doubt the debate will continue on both sides of the story. Until next time, this is Dervan Malcolm reminding all of us that every day is an opportunity to do better than yesterday. Take care.
JNN and Power 106 FM has just presented a live broadcast from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security Jamaica Productivity Center Virtual Productivity Forum under the theme Productivity, COVID-19 and Human Capital.